ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಭಾನುವಾರದ ಬೆಳಗಿನ ಶುಭೋದಯ. ಸೃಷ್ಟಿ ಸಮುದಾಯ ರೋಟರಿ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆ 3190 ಪರಿಸರ ಸಮಿತಿಯ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ಆಯೋಜಿಸಲಾದ ಒಂದು ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ ಸರಣಿ. ಈ ಸರಣಿಯ ಧ್ಯೇಯೋದ್ದೇಶಗಳನ್ನ ಸರಳವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಆಡಳಿತ ಹಾಗೂ ನಾಗರಿಕರ ಮಧ್ಯೆ ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಸೇತುವೆಯಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವುದು, ತಜ್ಞರಿಂದ ಜನೋಪಯೋಗಿ ಸಲಹೆಗಳನ್ನು ಪಡೆಯುವುದು ಮತ್ತು ಆಡಳಿತದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾಗರಿಕರಿಗೆ ಇರುವ ವಿಶ್ವಾಸ ಕೊರತೆಗಳನ್ನ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಗೊಂದಲಗಳನ್ನ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಮಾಡುವುದು. ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ನಾಗೇಶ್ ಸಿದ್ಧಾಂತಿ ಅಂತ. ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ನಡೆಸಿಕೊಡಲು ಉತ್ಸಾಹದಿಂದ ಎದುರು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ನಮ್ಮ ನಾಡು ಕಂಡ ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಅಚ್ಚುಮೆಚ್ಚಿನ ಹೆಸರಾಂತ ಗಾಯಕರಾದ ಶ್ರೀ SP ಬಾಲಸುಬ್ರಹ್ಮಣ್ಯಂ ಅವರು ನಮ್ಮನ್ನೆಲ್ಲರನ್ನು ಅಗಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರ ನೆನಪಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಅಶ್ರು ತರ್ಪಣವನ್ನು ನೀಡಿ ಅವರ ಆತ್ಮಕ್ಕೆ ಸದ್ಗತಿ ಪ್ರಾಪ್ತವಾಗಲಿ ಅಂತ ಕೋರುತ್ತಾ ಈ ಸಂವಾದವನ್ನು ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋಣ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ನಮ್ಮ ರೋಟರಿ ಡಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ಟ್ ಗವರ್ನರ್ ಆದ ಶ್ರೀ ನಾಗೇಂದ್ರ ಪ್ರಸಾದ್ ಅವರು, ಪರಿಸರ ಸಮಿತಿಯ ಅಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರಾದ ಪ್ರಕಾಶ್ ಬೆಳ್ವಾಡಿ ಅವರು, ರೋಟರಿ ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರು, ನಾಗರಿಕ ಸಮಾಜ ಬಂಧುಗಳು ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ತುಂಬಾ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನ ಹುರಿದುಂಬಿಸಿ ಬೆನ್ನು ತಟ್ಟಿ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹ ನೀಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮ್ಮ ತಂಡದ ಪರವಾಗಿ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ನಮ್ಮ ರೋಟರಿ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆ 3190 ಡಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ಟ್ ಗವರ್ನರ್ ಆದ ಶ್ರೀ ನಾಗೇಂದ್ರ ಪ್ರಸಾದ್ ಅವರು ಬಿಡುವು ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ನಮ್ಮೊಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸರ್, ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ತುಂಬು ಹೃದಯದ ಸುಸ್ವಾಗತ. ನಮ್ಮನ್ನೆಲ್ಲರನ್ನು ಉದ್ದೇಶಿಸಿ ಎರಡು ಮಾತನಾಡಿ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಕೋರ್ತೀನಿ.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ನಾಗೇಶ್ ಸಿಂಧಾದಿ ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಈ ದಿನ ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ನೀವು 10ನೇ ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ನಮ್ಮ ಸಮುದಾಯ ಈ ಒಂದು ಐಡಿಯಾ ತಾವೇನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ, ತಮ್ಮ ಕಮಿಟಿ, ಪ್ರಕಾಶ್ ಬೆಲ್ವಾಡಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ತಾವಿರ್ಬೋದು, ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಇದು ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಾಮನ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಆಗುವಂತಹದ್ದು ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಅಂತ ಆದ್ರೂ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಕ್ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ತಾವು ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಕೂಡ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ಇದನ್ನ ಅನೇಕ ಜನರು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆ ಕೂಡ ಇದನ್ನ ವೀಕ್ಷಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ವೀಕ್ಷಿಸಿ ನಮಗೆ ಪ್ರಶಂಸವನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ನಿಮ್ ಕಮಿಟಿಗೆ, ನಾಗೇಶ್ ಸಿದ್ಧಾಂತಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಪ್ರಕಾಶ್ ಬೆಲ್ವಾಡಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ 3190 ಪರವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಈ ದಿನ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡಿಂಗ್ ದ ನ್ಯೂ ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಬಿಲ್ಸ್ ಫಾರ್ 2020 ಇದು ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಒಂದು ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಅಂತ ಆದ್ರೂ ನಾನು ಭಾವಿಸ್ತೀನಿ. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅನೇಕ ಜನರು ಕನ್ಫ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಅವಾಗ್ಲೇ ನೋಡಿದೀವಿ, ಎಷ್ಟು ಕಯಾಸು, ಎಷ್ಟು ಗಲಾಟೆಗಳು ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ. ಬಟ್ ಇದರಿಂದ ಫಾರ್ಮರ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಏನ್ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಪೂರ್ತಿ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿಲ್ಲ. ಈ ಎಜುಕೇಶನ್ ಪಾಲಿಸಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಇದಿರ್ಬೋದು, ನಾವು ಯಾರು ಒಂದು ಎಜುಕೇಟೆಡ್ ಪೀಪಲ್ ಮಾತಾಡಿದಾಗ ದೇ ಆರ್ ಆಲ್ ಅಪ್ರಿಶಿಯೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಇಟ್, ದೇ ಆರ್ ಸೇಯಿಂಗ್ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಬೆನಿಫಿಷಿಯಲ್ ಅಂತ. ಬಟ್ ಆದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಸಮೀರ್ ಅವ್ರು ಬಂದಿರೋದು ನಮ್ ಭಾಗ್ಯ ಅಂತ ಆದ್ರೂ ನಾನು ಭಾವಿಸ್ತೀನಿ. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಇಂಥವ್ರ ಬಾಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಖಂಡಿತವಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಇದ್ರ ವಿಚಾರ ಏನು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನ ಬೇರೆಯವರು ಕೂಡ ಪ್ರಚಾರ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ದಟ್ ಶುಡ್ ಬಿ ದ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಟುಡೇಸ್ ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್. ಮೋರ್ ದೆನ್ ಹಿಯರಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಹಿಮ್, ಆಫ್ಟರ್ ಹಿಯರಿಂಗ್ ವಿ ನೀಡ್ ಟು ಜಾಟ್ ಡೌನ್ ಸಮ್ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಗಿವ್ ಇಟ್ ಟು ದಿ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಕನ್ಫ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ನಮಗ್ ಗೊತ್ತೇ ಇದೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಅಪೋಸಿಷನ್ ಇದ್ದೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಆದ್ರಿಂದ ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನ ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಒಂದು ವಿಷಯಗಳನ್ನ ಏನ್ ಹೇಳಿದಾರೆ ಇವತ್ತು, ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ಇವತ್ತು, ಅದನ್ನ ಜಾಟ್ ಡೌನ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಈ ಕಾಮನ್ ಮ್ಯಾನ್ಗೆ, ಎಸ್ಪೆಷಲಿ ಅನ್ಎಜುಕೇಟೆಡ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವೇನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಕಾಮನ್ ಮ್ಯಾನ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು ಅಥವಾ ಫಾರ್ಮರ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಇದನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ರೋಟರಿ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಅವರ್ ಏಮ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಅವರ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ವುಡ್ ಬಿ ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟೆಡ್ ಅಂತ ನನ್ಗಾದ್ರೂ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಇಷ್ಟು ಹೇಳಿ ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಒಂದು ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಸ್ವಾಗತ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ, ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಸಮೀರ್ ಅವ್ರಿಗೂ ಸ್ವಾಗತ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ, I would also like to thank him for his time, opportunity given to us. Thank you. Over to you, Nagesh Siddhan.
Thank you very much. ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಅದ್ಭುತವಾದ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹದ ಮಾತುಗಳನ್ನ ಆಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ಸರ್, ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದಿರುವ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ ಸದಸ್ಯರುಗಳಿಗೂ ಸಹ ಆದರದ ಸುಸ್ವಾಗತ. ಕಳೆದ 10 ಎಪಿಸೋಡ್ಗಳಿಂದ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ತುಂಬಾ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹಿಸಿ ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲ ಮೀಟಿಂಗ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಬಂದು ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್ ಕೇಳಿ, ಈ ಸರ್ಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ಹೋದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಪ್ರೈವೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ವಾಟ್ಸ್ಆಪ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮೆಸೇಜಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ಎಂಗೇಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಇಷ್ಟು ಹುರಿದುಂಬಿಸಿದ್ದೀರಾ ನಮ್ಗೆ. ದಟ್ಸ್ ರಿಯಲಿ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಟು ಅಸ್. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸೋ ಮಚ್. So the topic for today's episode 10 of Srishti Samudaya is Understanding the New Farm Bills 2020. Before we hand over the stage to our esteemed speaker, here is a quick preamble on the nature of bills that are under discussion today. The Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce in brackets Promotion and Facilitation Act 2020 permits both inter and intrastate trade of farmers' produce beyond the physical premises of APMC markets or designated markets. That's bill number 1. Bill number 2 is, it's of course no more a bill, Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act 2020 facilitates creating a national framework for contract farming through an agreement between a farmer and a buyer before the production of the produce, we can say. The third important act is the Essential Commodities Act, which was established to ensure delivery of certain commodities or products, which, if obstructed owing to hoarding or black marketing, would affect the normal lives of people. This includes foodstuff, medicine, fuel, etc. In fact, this act is suggested, it is suggested that the act should be amended only under exceptional circumstances, such as famine or other calamities. So to enlighten us on them, we are honored to have with us Dr. Samir Kagalkar. He obtained his PhD in Corporate and Policy from Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. And after a couple of corporate stints, he turned an academic entrepreneur. He served as additional private secretary to the late Union Minister for Chemicals and Fertilizers, Sri Anant Kumar. Currently, he is the State Convener Economic Cell Karnataka at Bharatiya Janata Party. He is here today with us as a domain expert on the new Farm Bills 2020. Sir, we are grateful to you for your time and for accepting our invitation to speak to us. ಈ ಕೃಷಿ ಮಸೂದೆಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಜನರಲ್ಲಿರುವ ಗೊಂದಲ ಹಾಗೂ ಆತಂಕಗಳನ್ನ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಅಂತ ಕೋರುತ್ತಾ ಈ ವೇದಿಕೆಯ ಮೇಲೆ ತಮ್ಮನ್ನ ಸ್ವಾಗತಿಸ್ತೀನಿ, ಬರಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೀನಿ ಸರ್. ಓವರ್ ಟು ಯು. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸೋ ಮಚ್.
Thank you, Nageshwara. Thank you so much for this platform and the opportunity to engage with like-minded people in Bangalore and beyond. Broadly speaking, I'll take about 20-25 minutes to speak on the historical evolution of the farming context, the laws, why they were probably brought into force, and the need for whatever the reforms that's happening currently, right? So if you look at it in a first aspect, the first aspect, broadly, if you look at it, the defense of India rules during the British time and especially during the Second World War time necessitated a control of food grains, I mean, that being the most essential of all the essential commodities. It necessitated a good amount of control on the production, more than the production, the storage and the stocking of these items. If you also understand that was a severest of severe famines that India ever saw during the Bengal famine time, as well as the World War II time, coupled with the fact that our economy was not an abundant economy but a shortage economy. When I say shortage economy, we were not producing sufficiently enough for all that was required internally within the country. So naturally, if you look at the context per se, the law, the regulation, and the intent of making these kinds of strict regulation was meaningful. I mean, you require a regulation to ensure that there was no black marketing or hoarding in a shortage economy, especially of an essential item like food grains. If you look at the 50s and the 60s, you get to see that India underwent a very, very terrific time, especially with respect to food grains. We had to import wheat from the USA, the PL 480 program. And in a way, it was a very, very humiliating situation for the country as such. I mean, you have to import food grains that was primarily meant at times even as livestock feed in the US for feeding our own countrymen. But the government of the day, the leadership of the day took a very, very important, drastic decision that ensured that green revolution happened, making sure that our requirements to a large extent was met, and probably we are in a position today where we can very comfortably and confidently say we are no more a shortage economy. Just to give a bit of number, in 1950 we had roughly about 50 million tons of food grains being produced. Today we are close to about 285 million tons being produced, right? Close to about sixfold. Probably in a year or two we'll reach the 300 million mark. That brings us to about a sixfold increase in food grains production, while our population roughly about 3.5 to 4 times is what the increase is. So which means we are broadly, fairly confidently in an abundant zone. So the context in which one particular frame of rules and regulations were brought in are no more relevant today. That is the first factor that I would want to sort of stress upon. Second is, notwithstanding the context, if the rules and regulations that were brought into play, were they effective, were they helpful, were they meaningful in terms of realizing what they wanted to do? That is something that probably we can look at in the next couple of minutes. The APMC intention was primarily to ensure that the uneducated and the worldly unwise, so to speak, farmer who hardly would have stepped out of his village or a taluka, to realize a fair and a decent value for all the hard work and the labor that would have put in producing the farms. It was quite natural that you see a merchant. We don't want to sort of paint everyone with a black tar, but it's a bit of a natural human tendency when there is business involved and some amount of easy money to be made if you're able to cut corners, right? So a situation would arise if an uneducated villager, a farmer out there to sell his perishable product, and on the other hand you have a well-connected merchant who has seen the talukas, the district level market, understanding how you could probably buy at a very low price and probably sell at a higher price. So to ensure that this situation doesn't arise, APMC was formed so that you have a sense of comfort. There are farmer committee members who are there to ensure that there is no unfair dealing to the farmers, and therefore the farmer hopefully should realize a decently good amount of realization for the hard work. But in reality, it so happened that the APMC in itself become a cartel, a small number of people working towards their own profit maximization rather than the profit maximization for the farmer. Term that is generally used when you have a monopoly of buying, it's called a monopsony, where if you have a single buyer and single seller and multiple buyers, it's called a monopoly, versus if it's single buyer but multiple sellers, it's a monopsony situation, the mirror image of a monopoly. So naturally, one can understand very easily that the APMC, in all its probability, was capturing the maximum amount of value for themselves and left very few things on the table for the farmer. The very fact that you get to see a large number of unfortunate tragic incidents like the farmer deaths, suicides, and on a recurring basis all across the country. It's not just restricted to one particular region or a state or a season, but it's fairly recurring all across and repeatedly so. So that brings us to the fact that notwithstanding all these well-meaning rules and regulations and the system that's been brought in, the farmer hasn't actually realized the value of what is supposed to be his due. This being the case, you have a government that came in 2014 with a very meaningful objective of doubling the farmer's income, right? Now let us, while we speak of one or two intentions of the government, let us look at purely from an economic perspective, try to understand if the declaration and the intent to do something matches with the economic understanding and the steps being currently taken. So the government in 2014-15 made a very public declaration that in about 5 to 7 years, by 2022, you must have the farmers having their income doubled. So now how do you arrive at this? I mean, any businessman, any student of economics will know that it's a very simple, straightforward formula. P into Q is equal to R, right? The price into quantity would lead to a revenue situation. Now, if you have to double R, double the revenue, you can work in 2 or 3 ways. One is either double the price or double the quantity, or probably work in a combination of both in such a way that the P and Q, an increased P and Q, revised P and Q will lead to a doubling of the revenue part of it. The last 30-40 years and more so the last 6 years of initiatives taken primarily try to address the supply part of it. You know, you have issues in terms of fertilizers not being available or the fertilizer being siphoned off. I mean, I must say I was extremely fortunate to work with the minister who was in charge of the fertilizers department wherein we worked very closely towards in a time-bound manner. When I say time-bound manner, we were given like a corporate timeline, 6 months time to ensure that the entire stock and import of urea was neem coated. The whole idea of neem coating was to ensure that the urea was not siphoned off for other legit and non-legit purposes. I mean, a highly subsidized item like urea was required in a unethical way by the industry. Probably it could be into plywood making, it could be into plastic making, and it could be even into adulterating of liquor and worse still of milk as well, right? So if you look at it, the first step taken was towards improving the quantity part of it. And that's been the strategy of the government in the last 30-40 years, so to speak, if you look at it in terms of rules, regulations, and the law, and the intent as well, right? Make sure that there is a good amount of water availability, irrigation facility, amount of fertilizers, amount of good seeds available, make sure that the soil is fertile, or understanding through the soil testing mechanism, give some amount of insurance cover so that the farmers are safe with respect to the failure of crop. So the MSP, all these things look at a situation wherein it ensures that there is a decent amount of quantity being assured in terms of production, right? And if you look at our history, six-fold increase is not a small achievement. As a country, we must be proud of the fact that the successive governments, the farmers, and the officials have made an important milestone achievement, increasing it six-fold. But if the stated objective for a government is to ensure that the income for the farmer doubles, how do you do it? I mean, there is a limit to which wherein you can increase or double the quantity repeatedly, right? It's over a period of time it becomes that much tougher. Incrementally you can increase, but to make sure that you go beyond a particular limit and double it becomes that much tougher. And the economic formula is very clear for you. The only other option for you is try to address the second component of the equation, that is the pricing. Now, how do you increase the pricing part of it, right? The pricing, given the regulation, given the rules, given the system that's currently operational, ensures that it's not in the control of the farmers, but in the control of the small cartel that drives the APMC. The farmer cannot sell anywhere outside of the APMC yard. There can be no other buyer apart from the small cartel of APMC traders, which obviously means that the price is completely outside of the control of the farmer. The quantity is probably in your control. You might increase or decrease. And if there is a situation, unfortunate situation, where each additional quantity unit of food grains produced, if it's a loss-making unit for whatever reason, your losses increase, there is no way that you can probably increase your profits or revenue, right? So that becomes a worse situation for a farmer if it's a loss-making per unit basis. So the regulation on the one hand stifles the price realization for a farmer, and without addressing the price issue, there is no way that you can increase or double the income of the farmer. So any economic student would naturally look at this as a logical step for ensuring that the price discovery is enabled, so to speak. How do you enable the price discovery? Only when you have a large number of buyers willing to sort of vie with each other, compete with each other, so that they give whatever is the best price available to the farmer, so that they are able to sort of procure the food grains, right? Which means to say there was no other option for you but to ensure that the APMC is not made the sole buyer. That the farmer is enabled to sell not only to the APMC traders, but to anyone outside of the APMC. It could be to a large trader, it could be to a food processing unit, it could be to some other big trader within the city, within the state, or probably even outside of the state. Which means to say the extent of the market, which currently at this point in time was only your APMC yard in a village, had to be drastically enlarged to make sure that it reaches the entire country, which means to say you're removing the monopoly situation, and with that one shot you are able to sort of increase the price discovery chances for a farmer. That's number one. Number two, allowing more buyers to come in can happen if they are once again empowered and enabled to run their businesses. For example, there is a unit which is interested in food processing. They have a strong capability in cold storage and in their ability to sort of process food and sell it at a later point in time, or over a longer period of time and space as well. Some items are picked up in south of India, processed and probably sold to somewhere in north of India. So that requires a good amount of investment in your storage capability, processing capability, and the transport capability, right? If the law doesn't allow you by the draconian implementation of the ECA, naturally you don't have anyone willing to invest a huge amount of money for the simple reason that you don't know when the government might just hit back and say, hey, you cannot store a particular amount of item beyond a particular limit. And this, as we all know, requires a bit of scale. And without a scale, there is very unlikely investment into this, which means you're removing one big segment of buyers who otherwise are willing to pay a good amount of money. Why are they willing to pay a good amount of money to the farmer? Not because of charity, but because of the fact that they realize once processed, once kept in storage and utilized at a different point in time, they are able to realize a better amount of value for the produce. So the perishability of the produce, which would otherwise push down the price of the food price for the farmer, realization for the farmer, would ensure is no more a factor, right? So now you have the food grains no more being perishable in a very, very short period of time. There is a set of buyers apart from the APMC who are willing to sort of pay a good amount of money. These two will ensure that the farmer now can conveniently and comfortably produce with a fair amount of, I wouldn't say certainty, but a fair amount of probability that there are a good amount of buyers who will pay a higher price or more realistic and decent and fair amount of produce. That's number one. Number two, the second, the wing of the reforms, agricultural reform that all the three acts put together represent, is enabling of contract farming. Why do you want to sort of look at this as a contract farming? Because till now, you have been looking at agriculture more as a way of living, a subsistence farming, wherein the farmer is producing something primarily for himself and his family, and whatever little bit is additional or surplus, so to speak, sell it out to earn some money for his other needs and requirements. The entire country since 91 has moved to an economy wherein it is commerce driven. It's more capitalist in nature. When you say capitalist in nature without being anything derogatory, it means that you're able to fairly fix a price based on the supply demand situation and the ability of the buyer pay a particular price for the value he or she sees in it. Except farming community. I mean, if you look at the farming sector, it's unfortunately it had a double whammy. While the production happened, the farmer had to raise some amount of loans. He had to do the farming, buy seeds, procure fertilizers, hire laborers, and ensure that the safety of the food grains are taken from birds, insects, animals, or whatever it is. He had to act like a private entrepreneur. It was entirely his own responsibility to ensure that he took the risk for all practical purposes. But when it came to selling, where the point where he could probably realize the fruits of all his hard work, it became a controlled economy. Suddenly the state enters and says, hey, you cannot sell it to anyone outside of the APMC, and the APMC decides what best it will give you in terms of pricing. So it was like two blades of the scissors, both sides being cut. At the one end, you are a private entrepreneur, you have to take loans, you will have to sort of repay the loans, so on and so forth. On the other hand, you had the state through the APMC mechanism and the ECA mechanism, not allowing a large number of buyers and putting it as a cap. The price cap didn't reflect in the fact that the consumer had to pay a smaller amount of price for the food grains. I mean, we have seen during certain situations where the price, even the dal price shoots up beyond 200, 250 as well, right? It in no way means that the farmer is benefiting. So out of the three stakeholders, the farmer is not getting the price that is due to him, the consumer is paying a very high price, and where does the price go? Where does the value go? Someone needs to capture the value, right? So if you realize that someone is capturing the value, it has to be a middleman. So at one level, price into quantity is equal to revenue. If you're looking at it, the government reforms that's been brought in through this three set of laws is only to ensure that a maximum value capture happens to the farmer, therefore he gets a better price realization, leading to the fact that he can now multiply that with the quantity and therefore try to sort of arrive at a doubling of the income, right? And this being the broader situation, one needs to sort of understand then what is this whole fuzz all about, right? So this is the economic aspect of it. So if I need to sort of move to the political process of it, it'll take about 5 to 8 minutes. to speak about what this political process is. The political process started off, let's say, in 2017-18 and 18-19, when the Agricultural Standing Committee made some very strong remarks. And the Standing Committee is a committee of some of the MPs being chosen across party lines. It's got nothing to do with one particular government as such. They looked at the situation of the agricultural sector, try to come out with their understanding, their recommendations and solutions to the problems. Basis which a high-powered committee of 7 chief ministers of various states were formed in 2019 July, last year July, to come out with their own understanding of what it means to bring about farmer reform, agricultural sector reform, so that the current imbalance, which is against the farmers' interest, is rectified. The recommendation of this high-powered committee resulted in arriving at a decision wherein the government of the day felt that the control of the APMC needs to be sort of released, and a far-thinking move in terms of contract farming that needs to be allowed, right? So an ordinance was brought into play on the 5th of June, and as we all know, any ordinance that's brought in has to be converted into an act by the approval of the Parliament in the next 6 months, and in the earliest ensuing monsoon session of the Parliament, mid-September, we had this being laid at the table of the House and discussion, or the political chaos that we saw about to happen. Finally, we get to see that this set of regulation that we are currently seeing is what was intended as a part of the process, not only just last couple of years, but probably before that as well. But it does take on some amount of political heft to bring about a change wherein it is changing not incrementally but structurally. When I say structurally, there is bound to be some sections of the society that will be hit hard, right? So what if the vested interest? When I say vested interest, it is nothing derogatory in terms, but the set of players, the set of actors who are the highest beneficiaries at this point in time, they tend to lose out to a set of people who probably gain from the new set of rules. So the rules has been changed now. So when you say the rules have been changed, there could be some amount of genuine concerns that many of the farmers do have. I mean, some of the conversations that we have had across the farming community and otherwise as well have raised some genuine set of questions. Probably I'll take them for 5, try to address them, then open the floor for interaction with the group here. One is, why is it being sort of hurried through? I mean, I just answered it right away. It was not an overnight hurried decision. This has been in thoughts in the last few years very, very intensely, and even before that as well. A lot of agricultural commissions that have come into play have made very, very clear-cut and scathing remarks on how the APMC stranglehold is probably leading to a situation wherein the farmer doesn't realize his due, right? That's number one. And number two, were there not alternative solutions? Yes, that's a valid point. As a country, we have gone through alternative solutions. If you look at the farm waivers in 2008 and 10, during that period, massive amount of money was spent. Close to 10,000-12,000 crore rupees was used as loan waivers. But the research work that came out later on told us that not more than 10 to 12% of the farmers benefited, because the loan waivers was primarily targeted at the loans taken from the formal systems, from the banks, from the cooperative banks, so on and so forth, wherein only those rich and mighty farmers, the farmers who had a large tract of land, were able to showcase some amount of collaterals and therefore were able to sort of take loans, were the beneficiaries. What about the remaining 80-85% of the farmers who would generally have a very small holding of land, half an acre, 1 acre, 2 acre kind of a thing, and most of them therefore were taking loans not from the formal system, but from the informal system, right? Which means to say even the loan waiver, wherein a huge amount of public money went in, was not really helping the farmers who actually required the help, right? So therefore the alternative solution was not something that was really meaningful and helpful, though the country as a whole took a decision in 10 years ago, probably a couple of years ago, in some of the states as well, when unfortunately when they went closer to the elections, right? So that's another aspect of it. Now the third aspect is, why do you want to sort of bring about a massive change and break down the existing system, right? For example, an existing system is the minimum support price, wherein the government comes out with a declaration saying that this is going to be the price for the wheat or the paddy or the pulses. Therefore, that sets a floor pricing. So the farmer knows that, okay, no trader, if he is offering anything less than that, is a fair deal, so therefore I should not take it. So why are you sort of removing away the minimum support price, or why are you removing the government's need for lifting the food grains? You know, if the government itself is a buyer, you have the sense of comfort and the sense of fear of the traders that, okay, the government will step in and probably pick up food grains, and therefore I need to be fair, right? And this concern is the most, if I may use the word, politically confused, a confusion, politically driven confusion. The Prime Minister of the day has repeatedly assured that the three things which form the existing system's backbone in terms of psychological comfort will continue. The first is the minimum support price. The second is the government lifting of food grains. And the third most important is APMC will still continue to run as one of the key buyers. All that the government has ensured is, instead of there being only one buyer in the form of APMC, will have 10 different buyers, not just restricted to your village, but to your, it goes beyond your village, to taluka, district, to the state, and the whole country. So the thing is, if a farmer is very happy that his APMC dealers have been very fair to him, and there is a sense of comfort and trust built up over a longer period of time, and both are happy, nothing should stop a farmer from doing a sole trade with the APMC body as such, right? But if on the other hand, you get to feel that he is not being very fair in terms of probably I get a better realization elsewhere, you're free to sort of play one versus the other, and once again still say that, okay, there is a 20% more that the outside buyer is willing to pay me, therefore are you willing to match, or are you willing to sort of give a better price, and therefore I'll do the dealing with you, right? So the point is very clear. The government, while it's brought about a strong structural change, has not dismantled any of the existing ones. Only the imperfections of the existing system, that is the monopsony part of it, the control in terms of the ECA, wherein you cannot store it beyond a particular thing, is given certainty and therefore removed. And third, a new way of farming has been brought into play, wherein instead of agriculture being a pure play subsistence, has been converted into a much more formalized business way, wherein the farmer gets to benefit with engaging with the outside investors, outside industry bodies, right? So taking this into account, we realize that the existing structure will still continue. There is a psychological comfort for a farmer that can still continue as well. And if someone is adventurous, willing to sort of explore or partially explore, let's say I've got 50 acres of land, but I'm willing to sort of explore on the contract farming for about 5 acres. You're free to do so, right? And another point of concern of the contract farming is this will lead to a situation wherein the farmers over a period of time, if not today, probably tomorrow or a year down the line, lose their land to the big industrialists or the investors who come there. Right? That's a valid concern, but let me say what the regulations are. The regulations very clearly refer only to the marketing part of it. Right? There is no way that the land ownership is even touched upon. So the relationship in terms of contract farming is only for the produce of the land, and that can be for as small period as 1 season, and each contract cannot exceed a period of 3 years, which means to say, worst case scenario, the lock-in for a farmer or the trader can be for 3 years, and it can be as small as a 1 season. Let's say this season we both enter into contract. At the end of the season, I generate my quantity, therefore multiplied by the fixed price, I get my certain amount of income, which is certain. When I say the biggest problem for a farmer today is uncertainty, right? Each season is an uncertainty. There is no way that he gets to know what is the income that I generate, therefore what could be my profit, therefore what is the surplus that I can keep for my family. By the use of contract farming, 2 things are achieved. 1, a certainty of income to the farmer. Number 2, over a period of time. That is another thing which I'm sure past experiences from places like Gujarat, Anand and Amul will give us incentives to the farmer cooperators to truly become powerful in terms of aggregating the farmers and acting as a brand in terms of dealing with the traders, the investors, wherein farmers will probably realize a better value for the simple reason that they come together as a farmer's cooperative. Right? So keeping these three things in mind, one can realize that this is a very bold and a strong attempt to do the structural alteration. When you say structural alteration, the imperfection of the existing structures are removed and new avenues are opened up, and so let the market forces play with the safety net intact. When I say the safety net, the minimum support price continues, the government lifting of footprints continues, and the existing APMC, which all settlement has got a good amount of personal bonding and some amount of trust developed over a period of time, continuing for the farmer. So this, in a nutshell, friends, I would want to say that a very cautious expansion, cautious aggression in a way, in terms of reforming the farming sector, wherein enough steps have been taken, enough caution has been taken to ensure that there will be no negative fallout for the farmer. There is no downside to the farmer, while the upside reaches the farmer. So in a way, it's a win-win. Maybe over a period of time, once the farmers get more confident, form far more powerful cooperative, they would be in a better position to sort of realize more than 2 times the value. I mean, hopefully that should be the day. I personally believe, though I have no reasons to, though I have not heard anything officially from either the party or the government, but my sense is the government is under promising and intends to over deliver. Probably doubling of the income is a very, very cautious promise. I'm sure in let's say in the 3 to 5 years time, with a stronger cooperative of the farmers, they must probably realize nothing less than 3 times of what they currently are doing, right? So this broadly sets the context in terms of what the historical situation was, how the revolution, the evolution of the regulations happened, and what the current context in which the farmers are facing themselves. What could be the major downfall for them currently, and how the government of the day has tried to sort of bring about the change, right? So now I leave it open for questions. Mr. Siddharthi, you can throw the question.
Thank you so much for the insights. Thank you for letting all of us know what the journey of these bills are about and where do they come from in terms of intent. In many ways, it looks like a watershed moment for the biggest private sector of our country, which is the farming sector. We have many questions for you, sir. Hari Pabati wants to know, he wants to ask, if the bills are entirely beneficial to the farmers, why are they staging protests? Is it due to ignorance or is it politically oriented?
Yeah, there are 2 parts of this thing here. One needs to purely read between the lines in terms of political understanding, right? If you look at the manifestos of the opposition parties, 2019 or probably 2014 elections, while they were in power themselves, it was a very clear-cut statement, a statement of intent and a commitment made wherein they believed that the way ahead for the farmers to realize their good value for their produce was to open up, right? So therefore, it is at one big level a pure political stance wherein parties in opposition tend to sort of take a stance hoping for some political gain. So keeping that aside, the farmers, in my assessment, or whatever number of farmers that I've personally spoken to, or probably some of the other segment who are farm experts that I've spoken to, there is some amount of valid concern. I mean, there is an anxiety which is a natural thing, right? I mean, if the system changes from what it was, let's say in 91, wherein banks were to be privatized to some extent, a lot of sectors were to be opened up, we did see in 1991 that people did have apprehensions. When computerization happened, people were apprehensive. They thought that people will lose their job. I mean, if anything, if you look at State Bank of India, the strength in 91 versus today, it is no way less, notwithstanding all the computerization that's happened. Yes, there has been a good amount of loss of market share, which is expected, right? Finally, what is required for the economy is a large number of players who can compete with each other. Therefore, the consumer benefits. And it's in this case very clear cut that the segment was not at all opened up to the detriment of the farmer. I would want to sort of bring about one anecdote from the life of former Prime Minister and incidentally a farmer himself, P.V. Narasimha Rao. He was a socialist to the core in terms of belief. While he was the CM of Andhra, he did come out with a massive socialist act which said that there needs to be a redistribution of land, so that the farmers will definitely benefit by having access to or control over the land. And he personally owned about 1,200 plus acres of land, and he kept 200 acres for himself, and the remaining 1,000 acres were distributed in his village. Couple of years down the line, when he came back to his village, it was generally handled by his wife and family. When he came back after he relinquished his CMship, met with farmers, he found not much of a difference in their financial condition, notwithstanding the fact that now they had better access to land. They owned, a small piece of land as well. That's when he started realizing that some farmers who had market access were able to sort of reap or capture the value generated, while others, though they had access to their own land, control over their own land, now ownership of land did not automatically realize in value capture. So an access to the market, which is far more important. Today, the farmers might own their land, but if they don't have access, that can be an issue. Now, this is a new way of dealing. There can definitely be a genuine concern for the farmers. How do I deal with a big Ambani or Adani or someone who is or Walmart, who is really big and who can probably browbeat us, which is a fair enough concern. And that concern needs to be addressed by engagement and education. I mean, for example, contract farming. How do you ensure that a farmer is not, browbeaten by a buyer, which is a valid concern. So the dispute resolution mechanism is fairly local and swift. When I say local, the first level is dispute resolution board that consists of equal number of buyers and sellers who sit together and have a redressal of the dispute. If it's not happening, then it goes to the SDM at the local level itself, who sits over adjudication in terms of who's right and wrong. And if there's no agreement on that, it goes to the divisional level officer, and all the resolution needs to happen within 30 days. So the very fact that you're having a localized resolution in a time-bound manner should give a very big sense of comfort. And number two, generally the disputes arise in terms of payments. Farmers are promised and the payment keeps happening, as it happens to a lot of SMEs here. I'm sure they'll concur with the fact that the 30-day, 60-day credit period goes on and it never ends, right? So the farmers have been protected by law in terms of saying the buyer has to make the payment that very day, and in a maximum situation not more than 3 days after giving the receipt of food grains acceptance. So which means to say, and this this transfer needs to happen in a DBT manner, direct transfer into their account, so that there is no further delay in terms of checks being given, process, so on and so forth. These measures will ensure to a very large extent that the farmers' concerns are allayed. But that said, if there is some amount of protest, that could be because of the anxiety, lack of complete understanding of the change situation. For example, most of the farmers that I spoke to were under the impression that the MSP would be abolished, the APMC would be abolished, or the government would not give the food grains. So if this is reassured, as been done by the PM repeatedly, I'm sure there will be a fair sense of comfort for them.
Thank you, sir. Also, sir, since you need to also leave in about next 12-13 minutes, you have another meeting, you told me. We have many questions. I don't think we will be able to take them all. What I will do is I will also run through quickly. Maybe we have time for another 2 or 3 questions, but the questions that have come in meeting, I would like to copy paste and share it with you. If you could kindly address them even offline later, that would be helpful, sir.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, it would be my not only a pleasure, but I'm sure it would be a fair requirement that we ensure that we address these questions. I look forward to them.
So one of the major concerns, or I would say rather criticism, that is coming from various forums is that APMC was itself a reform against a Sahukar system of the 40s and 50s. Now, APMC, though it is not getting dismantled entirely, much of its ecosystem will perhaps end up not knowing how to proceed in future. For example, when we say intermediaries, even a retail seller on the street or the lady sitting with little vegetables on the street side is also an intermediary. So what is going to happen to their lives if the corporates start selling the produce in e-commerce direct from grower to buyer kind of a situation? That's one of the concerns.
It's a valid concern. That said, the entire economy today is opened up, right? So the only segment, so to speak, that enjoys the benefit of being in a protected environment and, if I may venture to say so, not being fair in their dealings with the farmers, is the APMC intermediaries. Where the very fact that they haven't been abolished is only to mean that there is still a level playing field for them. You're at the local place, you know the people well. There is nothing that should stop you from pulling up your socks and try to be more customer centric. There was a fear at some point in time that in 91, when the reforms happened, that the public sector banks will collapse. I mean, it hasn't so happened, right? SBI is still one of the largest banks. Understood that from about 84 to 85% of their market share, they have dropped down to less than 40%. But the very fact that the consumer also deserves to have a good customer service is important. Today, I still have an account in SBI, and my father worked in SBI. That way, I mean, I do have a connect with the SBI as well. All my educational studies were supported by the SBI scholarship, so I have a good amount of emotional connect with that. That said, today you get to see SBI being far more customer centric than what they were, right? You get to hear calls from them. They try to be more technologically savvy. They may not be as customer centric, probably with some of the private sector banks that would have engaged, but I'm sure this is a far, far better SBI than what it was, let's say, 30 years ago. Correct? Nothing should stop an APMC body to reinvent themselves, trying to be a far more farmer friendly and still make good amount of money for themselves.
It's an excellent message. Reinventing oneself. APMC should probably go back to the drawing board and see
Very much.
how to manage the market. One question from Suresh Venkana is that the amount of wastage of agri-perishables are very high. How will the new farm bill help in bringing the better storage and transport?
Absolutely. I mean, thanks for this point. I missed out speaking on this. This is one of the key things wherein the amendment to the ECA will ensure that the perishability of the food grains is reduced drastically. You know, how do you reduce the perishability? By ensure that they are stored in cold storages and processed, so on and so forth. Unless until you allow these big players who can buy and store them, either it could be in the cold storage, semi-processed form or fully processed form, they would not venture out if there is an uncertainty on the regulatory part. Now the fact that they can step in and process it, I mean, if you look at some of the places in Karnataka, for example, go to the Bangalore belt, I mean, they're known to be very famous for processing their food, given the kind of rain that they endure in some part of the year. The kind of processing that they do during summer, even if it's like a very homemade kind of processing using sunlight, they're able to process food and store it for months together, right? Nothing should stop a big ticket investor from investing in a good amount of cold storage facility, which will automatically reduce the perishability of the items, right? The farmer will give at a more than decent price to the processor, and he in turn will ensure that they get a good or better amount of realization when they sell it to the city dwellers.
Yes. A word on the minimum support price. Is government also sort of willing to? So we understand that there are only 22 or 23 items that come under MSP. So can you kindly throw some more light on it, sir?
Yes, the very fact that if you look at agriculture, for a city dweller, it looks like a homogeneous item, sector, saying that everything is single thing, right? But if you dig deeper into the sector, you get to realize that there are different kinds of producers. One could be the regular staple food, it could be the paddy, the wheat, the pulses, so on and so forth. The other could be what is typically called the cash crops, right? So the realization is far better in terms of a cash crop than it's for a staple. Given the nature of staple food in terms of essentiality for the country as a whole, there could be some amount of requirement for the government to be stepping in to ensure that the farmers who grow them are not given the short drift. Therefore, the MSCs kick in there. But if you're looking at something which is a crop like, it could be a areca nut, it could be a cashew, it could be a coffee, wherein there is a huge amount of variation. Sometimes it crashes drastically, but at the same time, sometimes they make a humongous profits, a windfall, right? So during those kinds of phases, it's a bit of an adventure. And when I say an adventure, it is adventure on the capitalist side without actually burning your fingers too much. if the pricing is fairly well, given the lower perishability of those items, you are able to fairly do well for yourself. So therefore, the government hasn't stepped in. Over a period of time, my personal guess, I mean, I could be wrong here, it is not an official version, but over a period of time, you would get to see wherein we move to a situation wherein the government will completely step away from the pricing mechanism, only ensuring that the regulation will make sure that the farmers get their fair price and not the government driven MSP. Of course, it's easily 5-8 years or probably even 10 years away, but I foresee that as the next step of action for the country as a whole, right? So the mechanism today, you don't have a MSP kind of a thing need in a Amul sector, right? They're able to pool themselves, form a cooperative, leverage that numbers and quantity and brand, and make sure that they do well for themselves. I'm sure a similar situation may arise here sooner than later, maybe in about 8 years, 10 years from now.
There is so much one should know about this bill. Malvika says, what measures has the government taken to address the concerns of farmers, especially regarding communication of the benefits of the bill at the grassroots level, so that they can make an informed choice rather than coming out and protesting?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, the constant engagement in education is a basic requirement in a democracy, especially in a country like ours, where you have farmers spread all over the country with different levels of understanding, the context being different. For example, a farmer in Punjab and Haryana is not in the same context, let's say a farmer in Marathwada, right? The kind of farmer deaths that happened in Marathwada is no way to be seen or compared to, let's say, a situation like Punjab. Punjab, they are far better placed than probably the farmers, their counterparts elsewhere in the country. As a government, they will do everything in their command to ensure that the village level officers, the village level technical teams, it could be a, let's say, a small team of soil health testing team that they can engage with the farmers and convey this decision, or the local panchayats where they can have a local level intensive discussions and even education on what to grow, what not to grow. That kind of a system will, I'm sure, is bound to happen, will continue to happen. But that doesn't take away from the fact that there could be some amount of genuine concerns and anxiety, and therefore farmers get onto the street for protest. Engagement is the only solution. I'm sure that's happening. Even as we talk, this can be a different way of engagement as well, wherein we can probably talk to some of our own network who are connected to the farming ecosystem. You know, 1 or 2 farmers' families would be working with us in the cities. We engage with them, talk to them, to a large extent, try to allay their fears using the information that we probably procured.
Yes, sir. Lots of questions coming up. I think we just have time for 2 more. As I said, we will copy paste all the questions which are not answered today, and we will request you to kindly address that. Then we will ensure that it goes to the person who asked the questions. Mr. Anand Bhairath says, asks, will farming industry become a new job creator? Do you foresee job creation because of these initiatives that the government has?
That's an absolutely good point. The current government's thinking, when I say the current government's thinking, once again, I'm thankful for the fact that I've been in the inner circle wherein I could understand the way the cabinet and the leadership thinks, right? So, Anand Kumar, you always speak of the fact that I'm given to understand the policies need to be spoken of here. I'll take a minute as a diversion to think of the political leadership's thinking. The Prime Minister's thinking generally has been to take decisions that are cumulative in nature. Generally, he prefers not to take those initiatives and decisions which are extremely orthogonal or probably completely in silos. Each decision that adds to the next one is something that makes more meaningful in terms of the larger impact. That's been his thinking. If you look at the stated objective once again of the government of making the Indian economy a 5 trillion economy, there is no way that you can do that without unshackling the agricultural sector. 60% of the country's population depend on the agricultural sector. Unfortunately, the realization of the contribution to the GDP is is in the range of about 15 to 17%, which means to say anyone who connects the dots can very easily realize The movement towards a 5 trillion economy for the country with an increased job creation can happen only by the unshackling of the agricultural sector. Need to create more jobs. How do you create more jobs? Lessen the number of people depending on the farm sector. I mean, with a contract farming happening and with a large number of farmers coming together under cooperatives engaging in contract farming, it opens it up to economies of scale. Tractors can be brought in, bigger technological interventions can be brought in on not on an ownership basis, but on a contractual outsourcing basis. It ensures that only 1 or 2 person per family needs to focus on farming. What will happen to the remaining? They'll upskill themselves, they move to the jobs wherein you have the food processing industry or the logistics industry that will be located in and around the village. It may not be the immediate village, but probably to a taluka. So the kind of a job creation that will happen, therefore empowering the agriculture sector, leading to the larger objective of the 5 trillion economy. Valid point that you raised, sir. The interconnectedness is something that we should not miss about. A 5 trillion economy is an impossibility without opening up the agricultural sector, opening up more opportunities for job creation in the rural sector. This is definitely the path to it.
Yes, sir. We have come to the last question and we'll wind it up very quickly. Removing cereals, pulses, oilseeds, edible oils, onions, potatoes from the essential commodities, will this undermine the food security?
Absolutely not. The whole idea is you have taken sufficient safeguards. What is the safeguard? They will be by and large allowed to store unlimited amount of these quantities, except in 4 situations. What are the 4 situations? Number 1, if there is a war. Number 2, if there is a famine. Number 3, if there is a natural calamity. Number 4, most important, if there is a very sharp price rise, a spike of more than, let's say, 100% in a period of 1 year's time. So in which case you're able to sort of understand that this is a situation that's going out of hand for accessibility for common man, and therefore the government can step in. The very fact that these are certain situations that you know that the government can step in, but otherwise you are well within your limits to store and process, it's a win-win. The traders and the investors will ensure that they reap the benefit out of this liberalizing the ECA Act. At the same time, they know that there can be a danda if the price rise goes beyond 100%. So there's a band given, they can play well within the band, which doesn't hurt the farmers, the traders, and the common man.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Dr. Samir. There is so much of misinterpretation in the media and on social media that to have a session like this and to have an expert like you here telling us threadbare and taking all the questions in support and in criticism. It's truly been an honor to have you here today with us. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and coming to the meeting today, sir.
Thanks so much. It's been a privilege for me to be engaging with the Rotary, and I look forward to future engagements as well on this.
Most welcome.
Thank you so much.
I also wish to thank our beloved district governor for taking his valuable time off. Anytime he'll be on demand for 3 to 4 meetings, but then he made sure, he said, no, this is a very important topic and I have to come. So thank you very much, District Governor Nagendra Prasad, sir. I have an apology from Mr. Prakash Belwadi, who is traveling. He could not return to Bangalore on time to attend this session. He has personally conveyed his apology to you, Dr. Samir. Of course, there is a recording, and then we will make that up. I also would like to thank all the in-meeting participants today. Such wonderful engagement, so many questions. We will make sure that they all get, we'll bring it to the attention of the speaker and we will have them addressed. Thank you very much. Wonderful Sunday. This meeting is concluded and I'm going to end the meeting now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.